what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy it.
All right, let's dive into this Alabama-LSU matchup some more. We talked about Logan Diggs, right? We talked about him a little bit being forgotten what he's doing for this offense because you have the number one receiver in yards. You have the number one receiver in touchdowns, and we're talking about in the country. You've got the quarterback that's playing better than any quarterback in the country, but Logan Diggs has added something to this LSU offense. Here's Nick Saban on Logan Diggs.
Really powerful lower body, breaks tackles, good one cut runner, can make you miss. But this guy makes a tremendous amount of yards after contact, and he is physical.
And he has certainly been that. And this is a backfield that we spent a lot of time in the offseason talking about how it was going to be a by committee because you had Josh Williams, you had John Emery, you had Caleb Jackson, you had Noah Cain. I mean, Trey Holly was somebody that was coming in, didn't expect a lot, but he was a very talented back coming out of high school. And Logan Diggs has really taken this job and just run with it. Now, that's not to say that other guys haven't played well. In fact, Josh Williams, 19 carries, 161 yards, 8.5 yards per carry. So, I mean, he's played well, but it's hard to take Logan Diggs out of the game because of what he is doing, right? He's averaging 6 yards a carry, right at 6 yards a carry. He's got over 600 yards rushing, and he brings a physical nature to his, to his running style. Like, he wants to finish going forward, getting that extra yard. And he's brought a physicality to this offense. And I don't know how y'all felt, but I felt like it was going to be a by committee. I didn't think any running back would certainly have 105 carries as the leader. And then you got to go 19, 20, 20, and 22 for the other backs.
Man, yeah, Diggs has been a league out recently, but like you said, it's not like the other guys have played poorly. I mean, it feels good to have that kind of depth at that position, especially going into a game like this.
Well, it's one of those things, like we were talking about at the beginning of the year. Hey, you don't have one dominant running back in this backfield. You got a bunch of, pretty good guys that are going to split it. That's not the case anymore. I mean, this running back room kind of reminds me of the Alabama running back room right now with you have a guy, Jason McClellan. He's kind of your bell cow back. He's the guy that's going to get the majority of the carries. You got Justice Haynes coming in. You got Roydell Williams coming in. It's kind of the same thing with a Josh Williams, a John Emery, spelling him, not necessarily splitting the touches, but getting a little bit of a change of pace. But Logan Diggs has grabbed a hold of this running back room.
Yeah, and Caleb Jackson's been really limited in his touches, and I know Brian Kelly's been kind of really modest talking about him, but y'all can't tell me he doesn't pop like most of the times he touches the ball. You definitely see the potential with him.
He does. I mean, he's somebody that he's got 20 for 107, 5.3 yards per carry. There's an explosive nature, to say the least, about his running style, and he's going to be a really good player, I think, for a long time for LSU. And that, all these backs are different backs, and that's one thing that you do have the luxury of having, because if you're going to play multiple backs, like, you don't want four of the same mold. Like, you want to have some different options depending on what they can do. Like Caleb Jackson, he came in the Ole Miss game, he dropped that pass into the flats, and he went away for a little bit, but he's worked himself back into the rotation, which is nice.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if he gets more touches here. I mean, you got to give him something you can't expect, right? I mean, you can't just go on the script here.
And remember last year, it's a good point, Mario. Last year, they did do that. It's really the first time we saw that triple option of RPO where Jaden could give it, he could pull it, he could also throw it into the flats to Mason Taylor. And they used that a ton in that game against Alabama, and then it stayed as a staple of the offense. And so you do have a bye week, right? You have a bye week situation. I get 6 ready here from Saban Sound, Mario. And every single year leading into this game, we used to wonder, like, who's going to win the bye week? Here is Nick Saban talking about a successful bye week.
You want your players to enjoy their time off, but you also want them to be focused and ready to go when they come back. There's a balance in all that. You can't dissipate and go not eat right and do the right things while you're off. You can still enjoy yourself, but you also can stay focused on what you need to do when you come back. And I think that's combination and balance and all that. Balance in life is important in about everything that you do. So that kind of balance can create very positive results for you when you come back and you're ready to go. If you didn't think about your job, what your responsibility is, 1 minute for 3 days. You're probably not going to benefit very much from the time you had off.
Yeah, bye week's always, it's different every year because you play a different opponent typically. And typically that's how it works out. But for LSU and Alabama, I mean, this has been a staple. This has been a bye week that has been put in place for a very, very long time. And so it is different. No disrespect to any other team, but if you're playing Vanderbilt, your bye week's probably going to feel a little bit different. Maybe you do some different things. Maybe your attention to detail is a little bit different. But if you go to LSU or if you go to Alabama, you play for one of these teams, you realize what this bye week has to be. Yes, you get some days off. That does not mean you do not think about this game, right? And now, certainly with the ability to have everything on an iPad or right at your fingertips on your phone or whatever, like it is a game that you're always preparing for. And for so long, it felt like a game that Alabama had a massive advantage in the bye week. It did. It felt like their coaches were going to come up with a game plan that you weren't going to be ready for, and you were going to do more of the same. Right? I mean, we all saw, hey, they got an 8-man box. We're going to run toss dive right into that 8-man box, and we're not going to adjust to it. I mean, how many years did it feel like that? Well, you no longer have that feeling, right? Last year, you came out, and you were the team that had a new wrinkle that they were not ready for. And so it is going to be a different bye week every single year. Now with LSU, with a new staff handling that bye week different. Here is Brian Kelly on how LSU used their bye week.
I think it was important for us to do some self-scouting, some things that we needed to work on. I think it was important that, from a technical standpoint, we continue to grow technically in some areas on both sides of the ball. And then, you still want to meet a workload, criteria because, you just can't continue to go through the season and then all of a sudden, put up a stop. So we got to about 70% of our average workload last week and gave the guys some active rest over the weekend. And then they reported last night, and we're back to work today.
If you're LSU football, fellas, so I'm going to get you to put on the headset. If you're LSU football, you've had this bye week. What's one thing that you're working on the most internally for a self-scout? And then what's the one thing you think you're working on the most when it comes to Alabama?
I think self-scouting is just getting the guys to kind of play within the structure of the defense specifically. I guess you could say the same thing about offense, but I remember specifically the Arkansas game against KJ Jefferson. A lot of people were really worried about KJ running. They tried to do other people's jobs. Just be a little bit more disciplined, man. Trust the coaches. Go back to what you were talking about. You've had extra time to prepare for this game. You've seen improvement, yes, against Auburn and Army, but you've seen improvement. You should play with more confidence. Just play better within the framework of the defense and trust your coaches. That's what I would self-scout the most.
As far as self-scouting, first off, you got to find out who your starting corners are. I think that's number one. Also, as far as Alabama goes, like scouting for them, I want to get the tight ends and running backs involved a little bit more in the passing game. Alabama has really good outside corners. I kind of feel like their safeties and linebackers, not that they're bad, it just might be the weak point of that defense. Yeah. Somebody's got to cover those running backs and tight ends out in the flats. That kind of falls down to the safeties and linebackers. I feel like you have an advantage there with your backs and tight ends, so that's something I'd maybe look at.
Yeah, and get Kelly 11 ready here, Mario, because I agree with Mario too. Like defensively, like playing within the structure of the defense, because you are who you are, certainly at this point. But LSU, even in the weeks that they have played better, they're a quarters team and they're a cover 3 team. That's who they are. That is who they're going to be. In fact, like those numbers have actually gone up over the last couple of weeks when a lot of people are like, oh, man, yeah, they're changing things up. No, not really. They're actually doing more of the same. They're just playing better. They're understanding their responsibility, right? If I'm playing quarters, I'm playing quarters. I'm not playing halves. And you have to understand that. And it seems so elementary, but if you go back to where LSU defensively got into trouble, they had guys floating in coverage. You can't float in coverage. If I'm in coverage, I've got a responsibility, whatever that is. Whatever my landmark is, well, that's where I have to go, and it has to be definitive because the guy next to me has to know that I've got my area covered, right? I'm not floating in there because then the next guy's like, oh, well, hell, am I in the right spot? Am I doing the right thing? I mean, you're in your coverage lane, but you're kind of also in mine, and I don't really know where to go. And then there becomes what? There becomes a gap in coverage. And that's what you saw a lot there early in the season for LSU. It does look like they have cleaned some of those things up. Now, with me saying that, you're going to have new. You're going to have new in there. You're going to have young guys. You're going to have guys that Brian Kelly said it. Like, we played that sound yesterday. They know what they're doing by now. They've been here in the spring. They've been here now 8 weeks. They've been here in fall, so they understand the assignment, and we're going to find out because that is going to be key. And, again, it seems so simple. But when you have young players, like if you're playing at LSU, certainly if you're recruited like these guys were, you're talented. You've got the talent to do it. But one thing you worry about with young players on the road is not only do you know the assignment, did you hear the assignment? Did you hear the check? Did you get the hand signal? Because it's loud as hell here in Bryant-Denny. Like, are we on the same page? I mean, it happens to veteran players as well, but certainly young players. Hey, if we're playing, and I'll stick with what we're talking about, if we're playing quarter halves, and don't worry about that, we'll draw that up one day, and that's what we're playing. Okay, well, did the half side get that call? Are they playing quarters over there as well, and then this side's playing something different? Or, like we've seen, you got 10 guys playing cover 6. That's basically what quarter halves is, depending on, some people call it 8, but okay, well, did you get the full call? Because we have seen guys that 10 guys got that call, 1 guy didn't. And so those are some of the things as young players that you have to be able to make sure you go out there and handle, right? It's going to be loud. There's going to be a lot of moving parts, a lot of things going on, but the call has to be the call, and you have to play, well, you guessed it, the call, because that's when you get into trouble. So that is something for me that it seems so day one install easy. But, again, you're kind of hitting reset at the corner position. So day one, install easy. If you have a bye week, needs to be something that you go over multiple times. And I think Jaylen Murray is somebody that, if we're going to the, just once you got the assignment portion of it, who are you going against? Like, him as a quarterback and his growth and how he's played this year and how LSU handles that is going to be important. Now, you played a better quarterback last year against Alabama and won, in Bryce Young. But Jaylen Murray brings different things to the table. Here is Brian Kelly on Jaylen Murray and his evolution.
I think at first there was this sense that he was just going to run all over the place, right? This is going to be a running quarterback. But he's not. I mean, he is a threat to run. There's no doubt about that. And he can go from 0 to 60 as well as anybody. But he's going to stand in the pocket. He's going to throw the football. And the way they create offense is through a balance of running the football, formationing you so you can get some shots down the field. And he throws the ball well. I mean, he throws the ball well. And he can hit the open targets. He can push the ball down the field. And so I think what he's done really well is when he's been given the opportunity to take shots down the field, he's hooked up. He hasn't missed receivers. And I think that's been impressive.
Murray inside the chat, you're my guy, but he said it's not hard just to say 2, 3, 4 or man to the DBs on defense. Come on, Murray, man. You know better than that. You know ball. I mean, think about how many different variations there is of 2. Cover 2 man, and so many different variations of these coverages. And there's robber situations that, yes, it's the same coverage for a majority of the team, but the robber situation changed. There's Tampa too. I mean, there's so many different variations of just one coverage, and it's not just man or zone, right? And so those are the things that you've got to get communicated, and those are the things that you have to make sure, again, that all 11 are on the same page. You can't just yell out a coverage. I mean, you yell at a coverage, I mean, there's going to be a Connor Stallion somewhere also that picks that up, and then you're in trouble. And don't worry, we'll talk about that later. But as far as Jaylen Murray goes, he has gotten much better. And he is the quarterback for this Alabama team because it gets chaotic in the backfield for Alabama. This offensive line is not your typical Alabama offensive line, and in the middle they kind of struggle as well. And they were supposed to be solidified up there with the all-conference center. It has not been the case, and he thrives a little bit in the chaos. And he's not somebody that's looking to run first. That is not who he is, but he's looking to buy time to make the play. And if Ty Simpson was back there, like we saw against South Florida, he's a statue, right? And he needs a good offensive line because that's the style of quarterback that he is. So Milroe's the guy for Alabama, certainly this year, that gives them the best chance to win, and he's only getting better.
Yeah, to your point, he's gotten better throughout the year. And going back to that USF game, I think benching him was big. It was significant. I'll go ahead and give Saban a lot of credit for that, seeing the game from that point of view. And like you said, when Simpson and Buckner went in there, they were not better. So I think that was very intentional by Nick Saban.
You mentioned the Alabama offensive line, right? There's been one game this year, their best performance, they gave up 2 sacks. Yep. Every other game, it's been at least 4 sacks. Now,
that.
You can look at that and be like, well, that's a mismatch. but let's call it like it is. LSU's defensive line is not great at rushing the passer. Their run stuffing, they've been really good at that. And you're like, oh, well, you lose Mekhi Wingo. Jordan Jefferson's not that great at rushing the passer either. But I think that quarterback spy, whoever it is it Omar Speights, is it Harold Perkins or whatever, them getting into the face of Jaylen Murray is going to be the most important because, like you mentioned, he's a guy that needs to buy time. If he can't buy time, then that young secondary is going to be able to hold up a little bit better in the back end. It's not necessarily going to come from your defensive line. So if you're Matt House, you got to get a little bit of creative and kind of disguise your blitzes, dial up something you haven't showed a lot this year because your defensive line may not be able to get it done.
Yeah, and we could talk about maybe that matchup. Who is going to spy Jaylen Murray? How often do you do it? Is it Harold Perkins, who's been the best coverage linebacker in the country, according to PFF? Is it Omar Speights, who, Jaylen Murray is going to have an athletic advantage over? So, how often do you use Speights in that role? Is this a game in which we could see Whit Weeks again because he's an athletic linebacker?
Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.